Meteorologists are at a loss to explain what is causing this weather and why it has taken life to rise.
It is the agenda for the 21st century you're living in today. For a brave new world where everything that you cherished and held true will no longer exist.
A 7.4 magnitude earthquake hit northeastern Japan off the coast of Fukushima. It was felt as far away as Tokyo. Initial reports following this latest quake said a tsunami of 2 feet hit the Onohama port in Fukushima. The shaking was a reminder of a much larger 2011 magnitude 9 earthquake and tsunami to hit Fukushima, causing a nuclear power plant disaster. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe vowed to take swift government action in response to any damage or injury. NHK reported that Tokyo Electric Power Company was checking its nuclear plants, though operating systems were only briefly disrupted. There were no immediate reports of death or injury.
We're standing here in the Papatia Fault, a few kilometres south of the Clarence River Bridge on the Kaikoura coast. Looking here at the fault plane, the plane of movement along the fault itself, where this side here has moved up by about 1.5 metres, and we can see the back gravels here and the gravels on that side. But what's really interesting is that we can see lines of movement here on this fault plane which are moving down a little bit in this fashion. And that means we can see, it looks impressive that we're standing here 1.5 metres high, but in fact most of the movement has been along a plane something like this. So this side here has moved forwards by many, many metres. These fault scarps form very, very quickly, and we know from earthquake physics that probably this fault scarp ruptured across here at a speed of about 3 kilometres a second. So this has uplifted a very large area of new reef here, and the locals here describe not the earthquake noise, but the noise of water running off the top of this uplifted platform here. They said that the noise was just horrendous. And on this side, on the downthrown side of the fault, it's actually still even come up by about 1.5 metres. On the other side, there's as much as 6 metres of uplift.
Bolivia's government has declared a national emergency due to a lack of water as it suffers the worst drought in 25 years. The country's capital receives water for just 3 hours a day as reservoirs run dry. President Evo Morales said the country must prepare for the worst. Funds have been made available to ease the crisis in the agricultural sector, which has affected 125,000 families. The water shortages have prompted angry protests in major cities and conflicts between miners and farmers over the use of wells.
Just listen to lettuce.
The opioid epidemic is now at an unprecedented level in Virginia. The results, devastating.
We wholly expect that we'll see something on the order of about 60 to 80 overdose deaths this year.
That's just at Carilion Roanoke Memorial Hospital alone. Statewide, an average of 3 people die every day from a drug overdose. Roughly 24 are treated daily in emergency rooms. That death toll is up 77% in just 5 years.
I think there's just a tremendous amount of denial that the opiate addiction is as bad as it is, that it's as common as it is. It's now in our high schools either the 2nd or 3rd most common drug of abuse.
The Virginia Health Commissioner declared a state order Monday, which will allow anyone to get the drug naloxone from any pharmacy in Virginia without a prescription.
The idea that we're going to fix somebody up in a short period of time, send them out the door, would be equivalent to us saying that we're going to just treat someone briefly with type 2 diabetes and send them out the door with no further assistance.
But many experts like Bickle believe this won't happen on a large scale unless drug abusers are seen in society more like patients and less like criminals.
A recent World Bank report says human antibiotic resistance, coupled with the rise of so-called superbugs, can potentially kill millions of people, and the cost to prevent them could actually ruin some countries' economies.
A new report from the World Bank says that we've also created drug-resistant infections that, if gone unchecked, could kill some 10 million people by the year 2050. And this would have a domino effect of pushing about 28 million more people into poverty. People are beginning to demand more organic food these days, and that includes meat from animals not treated with hormones and antibiotics. Researchers say, rightfully so, as the antibiotics in farm animals contribute to human antibiotic resistance. And as humans grow resistant to antibiotics, nature will follow suit. Bacteria, too, will evolve and become resistant to existing medicine.
It's just a natural part of microbial life. Where it gets really tricky is when a microbe starts to resist more than one antibiotic. We call that multi-drug resistance. That means that any options that we have become very limited, and now we're starting to see antibiotic-resistant bacteria which are pan-resistant. In other words, they can resist all antibiotics.
The World Bank estimates that at least $9 billion per year should be invested in both veterinary and human health in order to get ahead of this issue. But as our expert stated, this could yield a return between $2 and $5.5 trillion. That's at least 10 times what it would cost to be proactive. Earlier this year, the UNGA held a special session to address this microscopic threat. They were examining ways to curb the overuse of medicine and antibiotics. Scientists expressed to the UNGA that the balance of microbes on Earth are needed to sustain life and are indispensable to the planet's microbiome. For example, microbes that live on the surface of the ocean will eventually end up in the atmosphere, where tiny water droplets will collect on them and form clouds. Clouds eventually cause rain. Eliminating those microbes by overuse of antibiotics could lead to less rain, which would lead to drought. And conversely, we could see a huge surge in other microbials, which would be drug resistant. This drug resistance is passed through sewage and septic tanks into our waterways and into the oceans. The UNGA says that 80% of the world's antibiotics are used to treat livestock, but not to treat infections, rather to fatten up the animal. And as the World Bank and UNGA have acknowledged, right now, as the human population continues to grow and wealth is rising, the demand for animal protein is soaring. But that demand could ultimately be the cause of our demise.
The rich variety of Iceland's natural resources have turned the small Nordic island into a significant tourist destination. Tourism generates 34% of Iceland's foreign currency reserves, an estimated $3.8 billion in 2016. But the surging growth in tourism over the past 2 years also brings environmental and social costs.
Iceland's dilemma involves balancing the need to rapidly and substantially improve its tourist infrastructure, while at the same time preserving the raw natural beauty of the landscape that those tourists have come such a long way to see.
Analysis predicts that this island of 330,000 inhabitants will see more than 1.7 million tourist arrivals during 2016. And next year, it's estimated nearly 2.4 million will visit. In 12 months, tourist numbers have risen more than 39%, but accommodation capacity has only increased by 26%. And 90% arrive through Keflavik Airport, concentrating the pressure of numbers in the southwest and Reykjavik. The mayor of Reykjavik is trying to find a balance. He's imposed a quota on new hotel space to preserve the character of the city centre. But in other matters, he says his hands are tied.
We think it's long overdue to define a city tax. So we have kind of better means to take the decisions needed, invest in the infrastructure needed, and kind of ensure a sustainable development of tourism in Iceland. And for that we need legislation from the parliament.
The silica-rich geothermal pools of the Blue Lagoon are one of Iceland's best-known attractions. It's expanding, opening 2 new lagoons this year, with an exclusive hotel resort due to open in 2017. And the managing director believes that Iceland's problem is not the numbers, it's the distribution.
We need to manage the growth better. We need to use the country better. We still have great opportunities, for example, in the north of the country. We need to have an international airport there and an infrastructure there. If we had those in place, we could double the numbers of tourists.
Another party of whale watchers heads out to sea, but back on shore, tour operators complain that taxes of up to 24% on ticket prices don't seem to result in investment in the industry which generated those revenues.
Though they're getting a lot of money from the taxes that the people that visit Iceland are paying in Iceland, they are actually not realizing exactly where it's coming from.
The challenge of managing Iceland's tourism economy will be high on the agenda of the new parliament, just elected at the end of October. The pressure is on.
The Alt-Right National Policy Institute. Over the weekend, they gathered in Washington to celebrate Donald Trump's victory. Here's how they celebrated, using Nazi propaganda terms, bashing Hillary Clinton's minority support, and saying America belongs to white people. Also this.
Hail Trump! Hail our people! Hail victory!
Using one of his favorite mediums for speaking directly to supporters, U.S. President-elect Donald Trump announced on Facebook his plan to withdraw from a trade deal he says would hurt the United States.
I am going to issue our notification of intent to withdraw from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, a potential disaster for our country. Instead, we will negotiate fair bilateral trade deals that bring jobs and industry back onto American shores.
In addition to proposals on energy and immigration, Donald Trump has said the US will quit the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal on his first day as president. TPP was designed to bring down tariffs, but Trump has described the agreement signed by 12 countries covering 40% of the world's economy as a potential disaster. He's vowed instead to negotiate separate bilateral deals. In Buenos Aires, Japan's Shinzo Abe was one of the first leaders to react. TPP is meaningless without the United States, he said. This would disturb the fundamental balance of benefits, which is also why renegotiation is impossible. There was also a strong reaction from China's foreign ministry on Trump's plans to pull out of the deal. We hope that these trade deals will follow the World Trade Organization rules and be helpful to the multilateral trade system. Also, we hope these agreements can reinforce rather than thwart each other. Australia's Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull also responded to the news, vowing to push on.
So Mr. Trump and his new Congress will have to make their own decisions in America's interest. That's their judgment to make. But can I say to you that it is very clear that from Australia's point of view, getting access, greater access for Australian exports, whether it's goods or services, to those big markets is manifestly in our interest. It is manifestly delivering more jobs, better jobs and stronger economic growth in Australia.
I think when the president-elect, who's also the head of your party now, Joe, tells you before he's even inaugurated he doesn't wish to pursue these charges, it sends a very strong message, tone and content to the members. And I think Hillary Clinton still has to face the fact that a majority of Americans don't find her to be honest or trustworthy. But if Donald Trump can help her heal, then perhaps that's a good thing.
I want him to have one day of the life that I live. Charms.
This immigrant mother challenges President-elect Donald Trump to feel her biggest fear, being ripped from her children because she could be deported.
Break families? Would he want to leave his family tight or just loose?
Lily, who is only sharing her first name, has lived in Oklahoma for 20 years. She was brought to the U.S. as a child and now has 5 U.S.-born children.
You have a dream. When you buy a house, you want your grandchildren to come visit.
Bye, guys. Have a good day. But in a Trump America, she says that that dream may not come true.
What happened to George Soros's friends and neighbors?
You're a Hungarian Jew who escaped the Holocaust by posing as a Christian.
Right.
And you watched lots of people get shipped off to the death camps.
Right. I was 14 years old, and I would say that that's when my character was made.
In what way?
That one should think ahead, one should understand and anticipate events, and one is threatened. It was a tremendous threat of evil. I mean, it was a very personal experience of evil.
My understanding is that you went out with this protector of yours who swore that you were his adopted godson.
Yes, yes.
Went out, in fact, and helped in the confiscation of property from the Jews.
That's right, yes.
I mean, that sounds like an experience that would send lots of people to the psychiatric couch for many, many years. Was it difficult?
Not at all. Not at all.
Those protesting against the Dakota Access Pipeline in North Dakota attempted to remove the burnt military trucks which the police had placed on the road 3 weeks ago to block access to the protesters' camp. They were met with heavy resistance by the law enforcement, rubber bullets, tear gas, and, according to numerous activist reports, concussion grenades. Despite all that, the protesters did manage to push one of 2 trucks off the road. But then, after the sun went down, and as they geared up to deal with the second truck, the real battle ensued.
A potentially deadly terror attack in Times Square foiled, apparently.
Mohammed Rafiq Naji, an Uber driver right here in New York, is under arrest, accused of trying to join ISIS overseas. Officials say he also discussed plans to use a garbage truck to go into Times Square and run crowds over.
Some other headlines now. Problem with issuing green cards is much worse than initially believed. An audit of citizenship and immigration services found thousands of green cards have gone missing. Some cards were mailed to the wrong addresses. Some were duplicates and others contained incorrect information.
Authorities in France have arrested 7 men and say they foiled a terror plot which was envisaged for some time.
This was to have been the first cabinet meeting presided over by Park Geun-hye since the start of 6 weeks of debilitating, swirling scandal. But as so often recently, a last-minute change of plan. The president was a no-show. In her absence, the cabinet approved a bill that would launch a special prosecution. The president has gone back on her promise to submit to questioning by public prosecutors who at the weekend named her as a suspect in their case against her longtime friend Choi Soon-sil.
In the 6 weeks since Iraqi forces began their campaign to retake Mosul, more than 68,000 people have been displaced from the city and its surroundings, the United Nations says. Roughly half are children, according to the agency. There are fears the exodus is only just beginning. Aid organisations estimate at least 1 million people remain in the ISIL-held city, most thought to be gathered west of the Tigris River, where government forces have not yet reached. The UN is expanding some of its camps around Mosul amid concerns hundreds of thousands more displaced civilians could need accommodation in the coming months.
In a battle for a city this big, progress isn't always easy to map.
After 5 weeks of fighting, much of Mosul has still to be retaken. Below, in miniature, the war plays out. In Mosul streets, life or death is decided in the blink of an eye. Just meters away, the so-called Islamic State. In no man's land, a dead body. Iraqi special forces say he was an IS fighter, one of a dozen they've shot dead this week. We're right at the very edge here. The Islamic State are 200 meters in that direction. And look over here. You can see children running, children playing. People are living 20 meters away from here. Yesterday there was a car bomb. No military were injured, just civilians. This war is happening on people's doorsteps.
We do stand on the edge of a great new era.
We built this great industrial powerhouse.
The whole idea of industrial capitalism in the West, government that was going to invest in infrastructure.
It is a time for pathfinders and pioneers.
What happened to the American century?
The share of income that we put into infrastructure has gone down starkly.
If you travel around the country, there's just not that much that's new.
What happened to America's ideal of progress?
All these things that had been established after the Great Depression fell apart.
You'll see that whole streets are just closing down.
A community that's undereducated, underemployed.
Baltimore was a blue-collar town. Now the air quality is wonderful because there's no industry here anymore. It's beyond light.
Detroit had a population of about 2 million people in 1950. It's now a little over 600,000.
A huge percentage of their budget goes to the military. This is an economy that's based to a large degree on killing people.
If you were to cut the military budget in half, we'd have a depression in the United States.
So they're literally working full-time and making poverty wages.
You have 1,600 vacant houses. It's insane.
They said, let's save a few dollars and pump the water in from the Flint River.
Decades and decades of being ignored.
Americans are finding themselves in a desperate situation.
It's a new state. A lot of talented people here, but you will never know because of the reputation we got.
If you're an entrepreneur right now in America, the last thing you want to do is take risk. This is not a world I want to take risk in.
America is not the pillar of democracy and freedom that it was once seen to be.
Here we are, naked in front of the world. It's a real tragedy.